Hello, guys, and welcome back to Reading War and Peace. Continuing where I left off, Chapter 4, Volume 2, Part 5. Sitting in the drawing room and listening to this talk and gossip among the old men, Princess Marya understood nothing of what she heard. She was thinking only of whether the guest had noticed her father's hostile attitude towards her. She did not even notice the special attention and courtesy shown during that dinner by Drubetskoi, who was already visiting their house for the third time. Princess Marya turned, and with an absent-minded, questioning look to Pierre, who, the last of the guests, hat in hand and a smile on his face, went up to her after the prince had gone and they were left alone in the drawing room. "May I stay a little longer?" he asked, letting his fat body sink into an armchair beside Princess Marya. "Oh, yes," she said, and her glance at it. "Did you notice anything?" Pierre was in a pleasant after-dinner mood. He looked straight ahead and smiled quietly. "Have you known that young man for a long time, Princess?" he asked. "Which one?" "Drubetskoi?" "No, not long." "And do you like him?" "Yes. He's a pleasant young man." "Why do you ask me that?" said Princess Marya, still thinking about her morning conversation with her father. "Because I've made an observation. A young man usually comes to Moscow from Petersburg only with the aim of marrying a rich bride." "You have made that observation?" asked Princess Marya. "Yes," Pierre went on with a smile, "and this young man now behaves himself in such a way that wherever there's a rich bride, he's there too. I can read him like a book. He's undecided now whom to attack, you or Millie Julie Karagin. Elle est très assidue auprès d'elle." "Does he visit them?" "Yes, very often." "And do you know the new way of courting?" Pierre said with a merry smile, clearly being in that merry mood of good-natured mockery for which he reproached himself so often in his diary. "No," said Princess Marya. "Nowadays, in order to please Moscow girls, il faut être mélancolique, et être mélancolique après de Mademoiselle Karagin," he said Pierre. "Vraiment?" said Princess Marya, looking into Pierre's kind face and never easing to think about her grief. "It would be easier for me," she thought, "if I decide to confide everything I feel to someone, and I like to tell it all precisely to Pierre. He's so kind and noble. It would make it easier for me. He would give me advice." "Would you consider marrying him?" asked Pierre. "Ah, my God, Count, there are moments when I married anybody," Princess Marya said suddenly to her own surprise with tears in her voice. "Ah, how painful it is to love a person who's close to you and feel that you can do nothing for him," she went on with a trembling voice, "except grieve him. And when you know that you cannot change that, there's only one thing left, to go away. But where will I go?" "What is it? What's wrong, Princess?" But the princess, without finishing, began to cry. "I don't know what's the matter with me today. Don't listen to me. Forget what I've told you." All of Pierre's cheerfulness vanished. He asked the princess worried questions, begged her to tell him everything, to confide her grief to him, but she only repeated that she begged him to forget what she had said, that she did not remember what she had said, that she had no grief except the one he knew, that Princess Andrei's marriage threatened to make her father and son quarrel. "Have you heard anything about the Rostovs?" she asked in order to change the conversations. "I was told they would be here soon. I also expect Andrei any day. I wish they could see each other here." "And how does he look at the matter now?" asked Pierre, meaning the old prince. Princess Marya shook her head. "But what's to be done? There are only a few months before the year is out." "And he's bound to happen. I only wish I could spare my brother the first moments. I wish they come soon. I hope to become close with her. You've known them for a long time, said Princess Maya. Tell me, hand on heart, the whole real truth. What kind of girl is she? And how you find her? But the whole truth, because you understand, Andre is risking so much in doing this against his father's will that I'd like to know. A vague instinct told Pierre that all these reservations and repeated requests to tell the whole truth expressed Maya's ill will towards her future sister-in-law, that she wished Pierre to disapprove of Prince Andre's choice. But Pierre said what he felt rather than what he thought. I don't know how to answer your question, he said, blushing without knowing why himself. I decidedly don't know what kind of girl she is. I simply cannot analyze her. She's enchanting, but why, I don't know. That's all one can say about her. Princess Maya sighed, and the expression of her face said, Yes, that's what I expected and was afraid of. Is she intelligent? Asked Princess Maya. Pierre pondered. I don't think so, he said, although, yes, she doesn't deign to be intelligent. No, she's enchanting, that's all. Princess Maya again shook her head disapprovingly. I wish I had so much to love her. Tell her that if you see her before I do. I've heard they'll all be here one of these days, said Pierre. Princess Maya told Pierre that she planned as soon as the Rostos arrived to become close with her future sister-in-law and to try to get the old prince used to her. Chapter 5. Boris had failed to marry a rich bride in Petersburg and had come with the same purpose to Moscow. In Moscow, Boris hesitated between the two richest brides, Julie and Princess Maya. Though Princess Maya, despite her plainness, seemed more attractive to him than Julie, he found it awkward, for some reason, to court Princess Bolkonsky. During his last meeting with her, on the old prince's name day, to all his attempts to talk about feelings with her, she had responded beside the point and had obviously not been listening to him. Julie, on the contrary, though in her own peculiar way, willingly accepted his courtship. Julie was 27 years old. After the death of her brothers, she had become very rich. She was now utterly plain, but she thought she was not only good-looking, but was even far more attractive now than she had been before. She was maintained in this delusion by the fact that, first of all, she had become a very rich bride, and second, that the older she became, the less dangerous she was for men. The more freely men treated her, and, without taking any obligations upon themselves, profited from the suppers, soirees, and the lively company that gathered in her house. A man who, 10 years before, would have been afraid of going every day to a house where there was a 17-year-old girl, so as not to compromise her and bind himself, now boldly came to her every day and treated her not as a prospect bride, but as an acquaintance who had no sex. That winter, the Karagins' house was the most agreeable and hospitable house in Moscow. Besides former soirees and dinners each day at the Karagins', a large company gathered, especially of men, who had supper around midnight and stayed till 3 a.m. There was no ball, theatrical, or promenade that Julie missed. Her dresses were always made the most fashionable. But in spite of that, Julie seemed disappointed in everything, said to everyone that she believed neither in friendship nor in love, nor in any of the joys of life, and expected peace only there. She adopted the tone of a girl who had lived through a great disappointment, a girl who, as it were, had lost a beloved man, or been cruelly deceived by him. Though none of it had happened to her, people looked at her as if it had, and she herself even believed that she had suffered much in her life. This melancholy, which did not keep her from making merry, also did not keep the young people who visited her from passing the time pleasantly. Each guest who came to them gave its due to the hostess' melancholy mood and then occupied himself with society talk, and dancing, and parlor games, and tournaments of bouts rhymes, which were fashionable at the Carrigans. Only some of the young men, Boris among them, entered more deeply into Julie's melancholy mood, and with these young men she had more prolonged and solitary conversations on the vanity of worldly things, and opened for them her albums filled with sad images, saying and verses. Julie was especially affected with Boris. She was sorry for his early disappointment in life, offering him what consolations of friendship she could offer, having suffered so much in life herself, and she opened her album for him. Boris drew 2 trees in her album and wrote, Abresc rustes, vas sombres, Ramu secunt su moi les tenebres, ela melancholy. In another place, he drew a tomb and wrote, La mort est secourable, et la mort est tranquille. Ah, contres la doles, en es la paz de odu aisle. Julie said that this was charming. A aquelle chose a des avants das la suave de melancholy, she wrote. She recited to Boris, word for word, a phrase she had copied from a book. C'est un rayo de lumina das ombre. Una nance entra la douleur, eles de quoi, que montre la constellation possible. To the Boris wrote down verses for her. Aliment de poison dum a drosempel. Toi sacre la bambo me se impossible. Tendre melancholy a vies mes consolor. Viens scama les tournaments de ma sombre retrate. Et mele ou d'accia secret. Asa plus que Jesu cula. Julie played the most mournful nocturnes on the harp for Boris, read Poor Liza aloud to her, and interrupted his reading more than once from emotions that robbed him of breath. Meeting at a large gathering, Julie and Boris looked at each other as the only people in a sea of the indifferent who understood each other. Anna Mikhailovna, who often visited the Carrigans and played cards with the mother meanwhile, obtained trustworthy information about what would come with Julie. What would come with the 2 Penza estates and the woodlands in Nizhny Novgorod province. Anna Mikhailovna, given over to the will of Providence, looked with tenderness upon the refined sorrow that bound her son to the rich Julie. Tu joues charmante et melancholy, c'était che Julie, she said to the daughter. Boris said, his soul is eased in your house. He has suffered so many disappointments, and he is so sensitive, she said to the mother. Ah, my friend, how attached I've become to Julie lately, she said to her son. I can't describe it to you. And who could possibly not love her? She's such an unearthly being. Ah, Boris, Boris. You would fall silent for a moment. And how sorry I am for her mamma, she would go on. Today she showed me reports and letters from Penza. They have an enormous estate, and she does not everything alone. Poor thing, they deceive her so much. Boris smiled almost imperceptibly, listening to his mother. He laughed meekly at her simple-hearted slyness, but he listened to her and occasionally questioned her attentively about the Penza and the Nizhny Novgorod estates. Julie had long been expecting a proposal from her melancholy admirer and was prepared to accept it. But some secret feeling of aversion for her passionate desire to get married, for her unnaturalness and feeling of horror at renouncing the possibility of true love would stop Boris. The time of his leave was coming to an end. All day and every blessed day he spent at the Carrigans, and every day, reasoning with himself, Boris said to himself that he would propose the next day. But in Julie's presence, looking at her red face and chin, almost always daubed with powder, at her moist eyes and the expression of her face, which showed the permanent readiness to change at once from the melancholy to the unnatural rapture of marital happiness, Boris was unable to utter the decisive words, despite the fact that in his imagination He had long considered himself the owner of the Penza and Nizhning Novgorod estates and had allocated the use of the income from them. Julie saw Boris's irresolution, and the thought sometimes occurred to her that she repulsed him. But at once, her feminine self-deception furnished her with a consolation, and she said to himself that it was merely the shyness that comes from love. However, her melancholy began to turn into irritation, and shortly before Boris's departure, she undertook a decisive plan. At the same time that Boris's leave was coming to an end, Anatol Kuragin appeared in Moscow, and naturally enough in the Karagins' drawing room, and Julie, unexpectedly abandoning her melancholy, became very cheerful and attentive to Kuragin. Mon cher, Anna Mikhailov said to her son, je sais de bonnes sources que la prince Basil and vos son was à Moscow pour les faire et Julie. I love Julie so much that I would find a pity. What do you think, my friend, said Anna Mikhailova. The thought of making a fool of himself and wasting this whole month of heavy melancholy duty around Julie for nothing, and seeing the income from the Penza estates already allocated and properly put use in his imagination in the hands of another, especially in the hands of stupid Anatol, offended Boris. He went to the Karagins with the firm intention of making a proposal. Julie met him with a cheerful and careless air, told him casually how merry she had been at last night's ball, and asked him when he was leaving. Though Boris had come with the intention of speaking of his love, and therefore intended to be tendered, he began speaking irritably of a woman's inconsistency, of how easily women can go from sadness to joy, and that their mood depended only on who was courting them. Julie became offended, and said that it was all true, that a woman needed diversity, that one and the same thing all the time would bore anyone. In that case, I advise you, Boris began, wishing to sting her, but at that moment the offensive thought occurred to him that he might leave Moscow without achieving his goal, and having wasted his efforts, which never happened to him in anything. He stopped in mid-speech, lowered his eyes, so as not to see her unpleasantly irritated and irresolute face, and said, "It's not at all to quarrel with you that I've come today." On the contrary, he glanced at her to make sure he could go on. All her irritation suddenly vanished, and her anxious, pleading eyes were directed at him in eager expectation. "I can always arrange it so that I see her rarely," thought Boris. The thing started and must be done. He turned bright red, raised his eyes to her, and said, "You know my feelings for you." There was no need to say more. Julie's face beamed with triumph and self-satisfaction. She made Boris say everything that is said on such occasions, that he loved her and had never loved any woman more than her. She knew she could demand that exchange for the Penza estates and the Nizhning Novgorod woodlands, and she got what she demanded. The bride and the groom-to-be, no longer mentioning trees, showing darkness and melancholy on them, made plans for the future, setting up of a brilliant house in Petersburg, paid visits, and prepared everything for a brilliant wedding. And I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you guys again for watching this series. I hope you like it. In this chapter, I read a lot of the French, so I'm going to try not to read the next chapter. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. Leave comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.